Teeny Tiny and the Witch Woman by Barbara Walker, illustrated by Michael Foreman. Once there was and twice there wasn't. Long ago, a family with 3 brothers, Big One in the middle, and Teeny Tiny. Every day their mother said, "You can play anywhere in the village, but do not go into the forest to play. Your granny says a witch woman lives there, where the trees are darkest. She eats little children and uses their bones to make the fence around her house." Big One and in the middle laughed, but Teeny Tiny shivered. He was glad to play there in the warm sunshine away from the forest. One morning, though, when no one was looking, Big One said, "Let's go into the forest to play." "Yes," agreed in the middle. "I'm not afraid of any old witch woman. Come on, Teeny Tiny." No, Teeny Tiny didn't want to go, but he went anyway. "I'll keep my eyes open and my legs ready to run," he told himself. Big One in the middle and Teeny Tiny played all day in the forest. The deep, dark shadows made fine hiding places, and the wild berries in the clearing made a delicious lunch. Little by little, the shadows grew longer. The boys looked for the path to the village, but no matter where they looked, they could find no path at all. At last, Teeny Tiny climbed a tree to look farther. "I see a light," he called. "Let's go there. It may be a house." They walked and they walked till they came to a little house all by itself in the darkest part of the forest. All around the house there was knobbly white fence. The gate clattered as they pushed at it. Just then the door of the house opened. Creak! And an old woman stood in the doorway. What a strange old woman she was, with her nose turned down and her chin turned up, and just the points of her teeth showing. Come in, my children," she called, and she beckoned with her bony finger. Big One and in the middle started toward the open door, but Teeny Tiny whispered, "Wait, remember what our granny said." "Oh, that can't be the witch woman," said the Big One. "She's so kind to ask us in." "I'm tired," said in the middle. "You're just afraid because you're little." "Afraid?" the old woman cackled. She had heard them. "You needn't be afraid of me. I love little children. Come in," she coaxed. "Stay with me and share my dinner. Your own nice warm beds are far away, but I have room for all of you in my little house tonight. Tomorrow I shall show you your way home, but now come and smell the good dinner I have ready for you." And the old woman hobbled over to the fireplace. She took off the lid of her huge iron kettle, and what good smells came out of that kettle. "Come on," said Big One. "I'm going inside." "Good boy," said the old woman. "You may call me Auntie." And she waited by the door, as in the middle and Teeny Tiny followed Big One into the house. While the old woman set 3 extra places at the dinner table, Teeny Tiny looked around at all that he could see. Over in the corner of the room was a crooked little wooden cage. "Auntie," he asked, "what do you keep in your cage?" "In my cage? Oh, sometimes I keep stray dogs, and sometimes I keep stray cats," answered the old woman. "And sometimes stray children?" wondered Teeny Tiny, but he didn't say anything. It was a very good dinner that the old woman scooped up out of the kettle, with bits of tender meat and plenty of rice, and the boys ate and ate, and the good food in the warm fire made them very sleepy. "You must be tired," said the old woman. "Come now into the bedroom, and I'll put you into my nice soft beds." Sure enough, she tucked Big One into the one bed, and Middle One into the second bed, and Teeny Tiny into a third bed. "Now sleep well," she said, "and tomorrow just see if I don't show you your way home." And leaving the door ajar, she went out into the kitchen. Teeny Tiny waited until he heard her picking up the dishes, and then he tiptoed to the window to look outside. The moon had risen, and the moonlight shone down on that knobby white fence. Was it a wooden fence? No, it was made of bones, leg bones and arm bones, little people bones. Teeny Tiny stared at the fence, and then he looked at Big One and in the middle, already sound asleep. They didn't know, but Teeny Tiny did. This was indeed the house of the witch woman their granny had told them about. Teeny Tiny tiptoed back to bed. As he lay there, he could see the old woman tying pieces of rope together. He could hear her sharpening and sharpening a great long knife, and all the while she hummed a sleep, sleep, sleepy song. After a while, the old woman called, "Who is awake and who is asleep?" Now the others were asleep, but Teeny Tiny was not. "The littlest one is awake," he answered. "What? Teeny Tiny, why don't you sleep?" asked the old woman. "Well, Auntie, my mother always cooks me an egg before I go to bed. Then I go to sleep," said Teeny Tiny. So the old woman cooked an egg, and Teeny Tiny ate it, but still he did not go to sleep. After a while she called again, "Who is awake and who is asleep?" "The littlest one is awake," answered Teeny Tiny. "What? Still awake? What will help you go to sleep?" the old woman asked. "Well, Auntie, my mother gives me popcorns and raisins to eat at bedtime. Then I go to sleep," said Teeny Tiny. So the old woman brought him popcorn and raisins, but still he did not go to sleep. And after a while she called again, "Who is awake and who is asleep?" "The littlest one is awake," answered Teeny Tiny. "What? Still awake, are you? What can I get that will help you sleep?" she asked. "Well, Auntie, all that popcorn has made me thirsty. At home, when I am thirsty, my mother goes to the well to fetch me water in a sieve. Then, when she brings it back, I drink it. Then I go to sleep," said Teeny Tiny. As the old woman bent over to fetch her sieve, a cake of soap fell out of her apron pocket. "Oh dear," said the old woman, mumbled aloud, "my magic objects. Better to leave them here safe than lose them outside in the dark by the well." She picked up the cake of soap. Then, reaching into her apron pocket, she took out what was left, a needle and a short, sharp knife. And she laid all three things on the high shelf. Then she opened the door softly and started toward the well. All along, Teeny Tiny had been listening carefully. As soon as the old woman was gone, he shook his brothers. "Wake up!" he whispered. "Auntie is that witch woman. Her fence is made of people's bones, and she has already sharpened her long knife. If we do not hurry, we'll be her dinner tomorrow." Big One and In the Middle heard him, and now they scrambled out of bed. As they were running through the door, Teeny Tiny remembered the magic objects that the witch woman had so carefully laid on the high shelf. A cake of soap, a needle, and a short, sharp knife. "Lift me up," he said to Big One. "If she says they're magic, then they must be magic. I'll take them along and see." 1, 2, 3, he tucked them into his pocket, and they ran with his brothers down the moonlit path. As for the old woman, she couldn't catch any water in the sieve, and she couldn't catch any water in the sieve, and because witches are not very bright without their magic, she couldn't understand why. So home she went. When she looked for Teeny Tiny, he was gone, and so were his brothers. So away she went, running after them. Now Teeny Tiny was watching behind him as the old woman came closer and closer, and he took out the cake of soap. "I'll try this first," he said. "If it isn't magic, at least she may slip on it, and then we can get away from her." And he threw the cake of soap right into her path. "Oh!" she cried. "You took my magic soap from my little shelf!" And she shook her fist at Teeny Tiny. Just then, the cake of soap began to grow and grow. It became a mountain, slippery all around. The boys kept on running, glad of that soap. But the old woman slipped and slithered, trying to get up over that mountain. "It's no use," she said. "I'll run around it." And she ran and ran until she came to the other side. "Now I'll catch you," she cried, and Teeny Tiny heard her. They kept running and running until Teeny Tiny could hear the witch woman's apron flapping. Then, carefully, he picked the needle out of his pocket. Whether it's magic or not, it'll prick her with this sharp needle, he said to himself. But whoops! It slipped out of his hand and fell behind him. Oh! Cried the witch woman. You found my magic needle too! And she shook her fist at Teeny Tiny. At that moment, the needle began to grow and grow until it became a whole mountain of needles, all sticky and prickly and sharp as could be. Well, the boys ran on, but the witch woman had to stop because of the needles. She tried and tried to get over those needles. At last she said, It's no use, I'll run around them. And she ran and ran until she came to the other side. Now I'll catch you, she cried. And they kept running and running and running. Teeny Tiny could hear the old woman panting and puffing just behind them. With all his strength, he threw the knife on the path right in front of the witch woman. It's our only chance, he said. If it isn't magic, at least she may cut her foot on it, and then we can get away from her. Oh, she cried, you took my magic knife too! And she shook her fist at Teeny Tiny. And at that moment, crick, crack, the sharp knife cut a crack in the earth so long and so wide that the witch woman couldn't run around it. She couldn't run over it. And shaking both fists, she shouted, I'll get you next time. And she turned around and hobbled home. The three boys never stopped running until they got to their own house. And as for that witch woman, may she wait a long, long time before she hears a knock on her door again. The end.